once they could make money from it, that's when things start to take off. But they need to see it kind of proof of concept. And then as far as like leaders in your country, you got people like Dr. Asim Malhotra, very vocal in your country. Zoe Harcum is very vocal. Sam Feltham is leading this group that's kind of bringing people together around low-carb diets and the science community. I know I'm insulting Malcolm Kendrick. I'm insulting a lot of people. I'm not naming anybody else prominent I'm missing.
David Unwin and Jen Unwin.
Yes, David and Jen, yes. So, so there's so many wonderful people. Australia, as well as the UK. And here in the States, we have, obviously, all the known names here. But it's not as good, I think, as far as like the foods, like you guys are talking about availability. It's not as good here because what's happened in America always happens with every diet trend. They'll slap keto on it just because it's the big buzzword, but it's full of crap. Like I go to my local grocery store about a mile from here and I'll go in and I'll see something keto. I'll flip it on the back and I see whole wheat is the first ingredient. I go, how is that keto? And of course, they manipulate the fiber content. Net carb says this, but it's 27 grams of carbohydrate. And it's the most inflammatory kinds of carbohydrate between grains and sugars and then seed oils that they put in it. It's just, I think keto is known, but people don't know the distinction between the term on a food and they just believe it and what's legitimately keto. And so it's a little more challenging here. I guess I call that job security, being in the keto space, educating people that when people get frustrated, they come and they hear my podcast and try to learn. But yeah, it's kind of cool to hear how this is going around the world. I hear from people around the world all the time. Keto's getting big here. I know New Zealand, I hear a lot of people talking about it's kind of exploding there in New Zealand now. Different pockets of the world, even in Asia where you are right now, Louise, a lot of people are saying it's not big, but you see pockets of it. So it's cool.
Yeah. And I think in the world we move in, we think it's bigger because everybody is talking about keto right. And the groups we're in and they're the people we're talking to.
Right.
But probably it's not that big, maybe.
Trust me, I keep my ear to the ground of real people, and it's like we're probably 15-ish% of the population, and you still have 85%, to use a Christian vernacular, that aren't saved yet. We got to save them from the perils of conventional wisdom about diet. Louise, did you have something?
Yeah, which is really interesting because I'm trying to tap into, obviously, the Asia Pacific sort of region as well. And I've joined a few groups that are based in like Singapore and Malaysia, where there's a huge, in terms of the burden of disease with diabetes. So, and it's been really interesting to tap into these groups to sort of see, well, what type of food they're eating, how they're getting access to healthcare, what their doctors are saying, and particularly because obviously we're dealing with different cultural ethnicities, how their families are reacting. And family is such a big part of their food cultures and eating out. And to see how they go, particularly in the market, because that's where we eat a lot of the time, is in these open markets, and what type of food they're doing. So I'm trying to sort of tap into that sort of, local wisdom to sort of see how I can get around and, what are the types of things people are eating, and adapting recipes as well. So that's a big thing because I'm a little bit of a bit of a foodie, because that's how Jackie and I also met through obviously the two keto dudes as well. So with the Keto Woman podcast, I love to cook, with Carl and Richard, because we also met at Keto Fest, and cooking is a big thing for me, and being able to do that here and to adapt the local flavors, because the food is so fresh, the greens and the flavors, the chilies and limes and gingers. So, and wanting to make keto Asian food as well. So
the cool thing about Keto Fest that they did on that Saturday, at least the year that I went, was they did this, you just go around to all these different cooking demos and you could taste all the food and watch demonstrations. That was very creative. I've never seen another conference anywhere in the world do that. So that was cool. Well, I want to get into some of the things you guys brought up in your start. So Louise, you said something about stress of a bad relationship made it very difficult. And I want to kind of tease into this for a bit, because I feel like this is an undervalued reason why people keep weight on their body despite their best efforts, Jackie, and they try and they try and they try, and they keep going, well, it's just not working. And then you even mentioned, Jackie, in your comment of, well, I just at some point just gave up on the weight because I felt it was a helpless cause. And I think that's more normal than we want to let on, that when you do the right things for so long and yet you see no results from that, it does kind of have this mentality of, well, it doesn't matter. Why should I care about it anymore? Which in some ways is good because it lets you focus on what's important, the health. But in some ways, okay, but do you want to address it at some point? So it's kind of this tit for tat. So let's start with you, Jackie. What do you think about stress from bad relationships, bad circumstances in life, even unresolved traumas, and this frustration that you get as you get older?
I think stress is massive. We know that stress releases cortisol, and that in turn raises insulin. So then we're fighting a losing battle with that. I think stress is all pervasive, and I think we've had lots of. I actually don't feel stressed from the last year and a half of being locked down, but there are lots of people that have this has impacted massively.
Yes.
And I think we don't realize the impact that it's having on us. And I, at the time in 2017, was going through a really stressful time because I was running a business. We were a minicab firm. We were being massively impacted by Uber, who'd been in London for a couple of years. Things were getting really tough. I was working all hours of the day and night. And when I say night, I mean all night. So I sometimes did 24 hours being awake.
Wow.
And sometimes I was working a night shift, which was 6 in the evening till 6 in the morning. You don't realize how that impacts your body. I mean, now we know because we've learnt it, but at the time I had no idea what was happening. And so there's no surprise that the weight was piling on in that last year before I decided to make a change. And you know, when I decided to make the change, I hadn't really decided. I just thought, oh well, I'll give it a go, not expecting it to work. So the fact that 4 years down the line I still weigh less than I did in my 30s is massive.
Well, and not just weigh less, kind of like you gave up on the weight, but you embraced the health. You didn't give up on trying to be healthy. You just gave up on this esoteric goal of, I want to lose weight. And Louise, that's so common, I think, where some of us that have done this for a long time, you get to the mental state where you go, okay, what's important here? What is most important? Being healthy or trying to look like, I really hate this. I was contacted recently to be a part of a summit called the Look Good Naked Summit. And I had to politely decline because I'm like, that doesn't align with my values. I look good naked to Jimmy. That's all that matters. But I don't think the rest of the world needs to know what I look like naked and look good naked. That's not my goal. Feel good regardless. If that was the name of your conference, I would be totally a part of that.
I was going to say, I look good with the lights off, so that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm good with that. Like, yeah, I am. What resonates with me was our good friend Daisy Brackenhall, who said that she was hiding behind this big wall of fat. So this big wall of fat was protecting, obviously, everything that was underneath. And I think that really, when she said that to me, you know, that so resonated with me because, you know, I had this traumatic experience where I was completely and absolutely rejected, you know, because I didn't look good naked to the person that I thought was going to be, you know, the one. And, you know, but that's obviously part of it was obviously emotional immaturity, and obviously there were other issues that that came into the relationship. So in terms of breaking it down.
Yeah.
So I hid behind this big wall of fat, from this emotional sort of trauma, rejection, and that's how I dealt with it through food. And food was the escape. Food, obviously, as we now know, through having, interviewed like Jen Unwin with food addictions and how addictive these foods are. And I was in this dopamine cycle, and, Dr. Phil said, I was having this party in my mouth, and because the food chemical brain relationship, that I was increasingly becoming addicted. I was also single parenting my son who had special needs, and as part of that stress, part of doing my dissertation, I was a single mom working full time, and studying. So I had things that I could control and things that obviously I couldn't control. And underlying all of that was all this food, my relationship with food as an escape from the trauma. And increasingly the big wall of fat, as Daisy would say, was protecting this hurt, this hurt person. So once I dealt with the trauma, I did see a therapist, and that therapist was a specialist in food, like eating disorders. Not to say I was diagnosed with a eating disorder, but I certainly had disorderly relationship eating with food.
Yes.
And undid all that in therapy. And I did 3 years leading up to the decision to make for the weight loss surgery. And then I had another 2 years post-operatively. So I put a lot of years of therapy into making sure now I'm good. I mean, don't get me wrong. Being in a foreign country, which I don't speak the language, and in a pandemic, is pretty stressful, but I've got the tools. I've got the emotional intelligence to know, hey, I'm not feeling so good right now, and I need to do some self-soothing in a positive thing with a positive relationship with food. I'm going to go and, because we've still got restrictions here, I'm going to take a bath. I'm going to go watch some mindless Netflix, and I'm just going to chill, and do that. That's, to me, that's, I don't need to hide behind that big wall of fat. I just need to find and have that healthy relationship with food now.
Love it. Since you mentioned Dr. Phil twice now, I have to do my Dr. Phil line for you. Today can be a changing day in your life. Sorry.
Thank you. I used to like him. I mean, he was a no-nonsense guy, not all of the time, but that party in your mouth sort of so resonated with me, and it's just like, maybe I just needed a straight talking Texan doctor, to tell me to snap out of it, Louise, and stop putting that rubbish in your food.
That southern accent that he talked like this, and you just couldn't deny when he would talk to you. See, I can do it as an American. I can make fun of an American accent. Well, let's shift over to something you said, Jackie. You talked about giving up on the weight. One of the other things was how we play mind games with ourselves. And sometimes we get in our own heads, and I've been doing a lot of like my own self-reflection the last couple of years. Like you were talking about, Louise, you've been on this journey. I have too. And the mind games, Jackie, that's the hard one. How do you stop talking to yourself? And we all do it. Let's just admit it. It's just a part of the process. But sometimes we're our own worst enemy when we should be our best advocate.
Yeah, definitely. Because we can talk ourselves into and out of anything in a way.
Yeah.
And so I had years and years of telling myself that I can't do diets. I can't stick to them. I can't do any more than 3 weeks. I'm going to do it for 3 weeks and then I'm going to give up. So why bother? It got to that point for many years, many years even before, that why was I going to bother? I'm not going to bother. And I forgot where I was going with this. We we just choose what we want to tell ourselves.